Hi everyone, hope you're well. Welcome to another episode of the Joy of the Rediscovered album. And this week, the year is 2000, and the Rediscovered album for me is In Flames' Clayman. So yeah, I have not listened to this, I don't think, since it came out, and as is the case with most of these albums, if not nearly all of them. I listened to this again, like incessantly, for about 2 months. It came out on the 3rd of July 2000. So we'll go through, as I do with all these episodes, its sort of placement in the grand scheme of things in my little world, and outside of it in terms of the year 2000, and where it sort of rubs up against other music and other musical genres. I'll include a link to all the tabs up here if you're interested in digging deeper. I'll also include some information for some of the most popular albums by the band and other albums that were also popular for the years that those popular albums came out in the description. And I do that in actually every week, but I don't think I always mention it. So yeah, Clayman, 5th studio album, and it was the first album which I got into the band through. Pretty dark, but as with a lot of melodic death metal, very interesting melodies in it. A real sort of like ear candy. So both heavy and melodic. And this was a great one to listen to because, we're talking now about, 23 years. And apart from things like Bullet Ride, Pinball Map, and I think the track Clayman, I'd actually forgotten a lot of these tracks. And just forgotten how strong the album was. They did re-record the album apparently for a 20th anniversary edition, which I didn't know. And I'm not a big fan of bands actually re-recording stuff. The only exception is if the band, the production was absolutely dreadful. And there's been a few other reasons, like I seem to remember in more than a couple of instances, I imagine it's happened, where bands have subsequently run into certain weird copyright issues and had to re-record albums with tracks removed, or other instances where they've re-recorded an album because of various publishing deals to sort of circumvent previously bad publishing deals as well. So I'm not sure what the motivation was to re-record this. But yeah, well worth checking out if you haven't checked out In Flames. I mean, I say that every week, but regardless of whether you're into this particular genre, it is certainly, a key band from that genre. Along with At the Gates and Dark Tranquillity. We'll have a look about, the different, where it places in the band's timeline, because what's interesting is really from this album onwards was when they started to slowly change their sound. And that happened with a lot of bands around that period that were pretty heavy, played some form of melodic death metal or like doom death. A lot of those bands, their sound evolved quite a lot. Like, good example is Catatonia, spelt with a K. They very much, I suppose, evolved in parallel in some ways. So as I've said, this is the first album I sort of stepped into them. I didn't really keep up with them release-wise. I mean, I've listened to these albums, some of them on Spotify subsequently, but that was quite a number of years later. I did buy Colony, and I've listened to some of the other earlier albums on Spotify, but yeah, I basically only own 2 albums by the band, both on CD. Now, sometime, when was it? Yeah, so here we go, the exact date. So 2013, so around, well, between the release of Sounds of a Playground Fading and Siren Charms, and I remember seeing these T-shirts, I think at the gig, or definitely that imagery. So yeah, I was lucky enough to go to see them 2013. By then I'd already moved to Nova Scotia, so I went to see them at the Cunard Centre. So I ended up seeing quite a few bands there, actually. Not so much now. I think actually I don't even know if it's available as a live venue anymore. But it's down near the waterfront, actually. And I remember it being an awesome gig. I'm trying to remember who was playing the support. I think there was a band called Battlecross, I seem to remember. I can't remember if there were 2 or 3 bands. And then I thought one thing I'd do, as I'd have been doing, I think since a previous episode going forward, is just try and place this, or the band, in terms of similar artists. I'm going to use the Last FM one, I think, because I find that seems to give the closest, to me anyway. When I look at the bands, I think, oh yeah, then I can see why they're included. I have got my own tools that I do use to generate similar artists. For instance, Spotify have a way you can look up that in Spotify, and I've also got a Python program which goes in and interrogates the Last FM API and gets this list off as well. But yeah, you can see Dark Tranquility on the list, At the Gates, Arch Enemy, Aman Amrath, and there's a few other ones here that I haven't listened to. I think I've listened to this band probably once, and haven't got around to really listening to any Soil work. And you can see this list goes on to for quite a while. The further it goes in, the further afield it gets, basically. Although, there's a lot of melodic death metal. I suppose there's a lot of bands that at some point in their career, in extreme music, could have probably fallen into that category. I always like to take a look at the Kerrang list for albums of the year from that year, just to see what else I might have been listening to. One thing I noticed that's really interesting in this period in 2000, so I had gone to see Rob Halford live at the London Astoria 2. So that was a period, between him leaving Judas Priest and then rejoining a little bit later. So at that point, Ripper Owens was singing in Judas Priest. And it was pretty cool. I got to see, within about a year or so, I got to see Halford play with, he had an awesome backing band at that point. Well, he's always had really good musicians playing for his solo stuff and his stuff outside of Priest. But I also got to see Judas Priest with it being fronted by Ripper Owens, which is really cool. So, but when I looked through this, one thing I noticed was there were a lot of like hard rock, indie rock bands, around that time that I just wasn't listening to. Although I was listening to Queens of the Stone Age at the Drive-In, Amen, and I did have, I can't remember if I bought White Pony by the Deftones or not. I wasn't listening to Monster Magnet at that point, or wasn't keeping up with them. I did have that album, Pantera. Didn't have that. Spiritual Beggars. I was going to check them actually. I think that's Spiritual Beggars is the band. Now let's look it up actually, because there is a very loose connection here in terms of let's have a look. Yeah, Michael Amott from Arch Enemy. And on here, Krista Amott actually played on one of their tracks. And of course, Arch Enemy are another melodic death metal band. Excellent band. I saw them, funnily enough, sometime in, I don't know, the late 2000s at Brixton Academy. I think they were supporting maybe Opeth. I can't remember if it was Opeth or Machine Head. And back then it had the lineup with Angela in it. So yeah, it would have been probably around Rise of the Tyrant era. Yeah. How was it? Angela Gosso joined in 2001. I was aware of Arch Enemy before them. I'd bought Black Earth and I think the third album. Yeah, Burning Bridges as well. So yeah, so it was interesting to see Spiritual Beggars on the list, which is this sort of spin-off band that obviously play in a different style. And they're actually well worth checking out. But I completely skipped over them. Haven't got around to listening to this band. I do remember them getting name checked on the Friday Rock Show around that time. And I don't know why I skipped over this album by AFI. I got into them around Black Sails and then bought Sing the Sorrow and the album after that. But for some reason, never listened to this at the time. So it's pretty interesting, going through in the last week, listening to Clayman, listening to stuff like Queens of the Stone Age, At the Drive-In, Amen, which I had listened to around that time period, and then a few other things as well. When I look at so this is a Terrorizer list. So this is, I wasn't buying Kerrang at that point. I was just curious, really, for this episode. But I was buying Terrorizer. And so I was just thinking through off of their list, like what albums did I buy ultimately here. So I've got that, Black Sails of the Sunset. I remember buying that either when it came out, I think, or the following year. I think I have this, pretty sure. These two albums. This is a really cool album, Sigur Rós. It was pretty cool because there were some experimental albums and quite ambient albums also appearing on Terrorizer Albums of the Year as well, which was always cool. And this is how I got into Sigur Rós actually, through this end of year. So it was a really cool year for music actually. Amen, I've Come For Your Parents. I think I'd mentioned maybe in a previous music episode about listening to At the Drive-In again, this album, Relationship of Command, and I'd forgotten how good it was. Unfortunately, because I did that several months ago, I probably would have done that one, but I couldn't because I had already listened to it, so it wasn't really, strictly speaking, a completely rediscovered album as of doing this episode, which Clayman was. So. Yeah, so I had that. Rated R, Queens of the Stone Age. Yeah, I bought that when it came out. Gathering, I think I was already into. I'm trying to remember now. I think their album previous to this was How to Measure a Planet, which I have. Yeah, I need to listen to this actually. I have this, White Pony by Deftones. Yeah, I got into them pretty late. And I didn't keep up with Stuck Mojo either. I listened to them around about 97. They were on a list, I think, from '96 in Terrorizer. The first list Terrorizer did an end of year. And Flority, I don't think I was listening to them yet. The Damage Manual are an interesting band. I think that's a spin-off Killing Joke band, actually. Let me just quickly look that up. Yeah. Industrial Supergroup. Mark Atkins, Chris Connolly, Geordie Walker and Jar Wobble. Yeah, there were several sort of Killing Joke related side projects going on, I think, around that time. Things like Murder Inc. I don't know if they were still releasing stuff in 2000s. Oh no, actually, yeah, my mistake. It's 92. Wow, that was quite a bit earlier. Yeah. What were Killing Joke doing in 2000? Not much. Not till 2003. Yeah, I bought that when it came out. So, yeah. So, what I'll do in these episodes going forward, I'm not going to go through the whole of the Wikipedia article for that year in music, but I will quickly look around about that time period. So, you know, when did I say that Clayman came out? July, yeah. So quickly look at July and see if there's anything else that hit my radar that wasn't on either of the lists. So was this the debut album by Killswitch Engage? I didn't get into them until quite a bit later. I think one of their tracks turned up on a soundtrack for around the time of Triple X, that film, either that film or another one that I saw around that time. So that was quite a bit later, I think. Covenant by UFO. 15th album. I didn't buy that at the time. I don't think I'm going to find much here, actually. No. Oh, there's Resurrection by Halford. So yeah, released the following month. Oh, Wheatus album. But didn't own it. I remember this coming out, LD50 by Mudvayne. Again, a lot of this stuff, yeah, I didn't buy it at the time. Yeah, I was a bit more focused on what was in Terrorizer, really, the music generally. So let's have a look at the music charts. I'm just always curious when I do these as to what was going on in the background outside of whatever predominant genre I was listening to, which would have been extreme music. And so these are number one singles. Oasis was still putting stuff out. Manic Street Preachers was still doing well. Oh, this is a really good album, actually. The Melanie C album. Northern Star, I think it's called. Oh, Breathless by The Cause. Oh, this, Five and Queen, We Will Rock You. Beautiful Day by U2. That's a really good track. Music by Madonna. So that was the month that Clayman came out. Number one albums. Did I buy any of these? I did buy Play by Moby. Which one's that one? No, I don't have that. I have the one with Me and My Monkey on it. I do have this one. I can't remember which was the album that they pushed out on Apple pushed out to everybody. I don't know if that was the album or not. But somehow I have this on my iPod, so I'm not sure why. If that's not the case, unless maybe my wife had a copy. Oh, #1 compilation albums. Alright, quickly down here, what do we got? Compare the charts with the best-selling singles, and again, this is in the UK. Everything with this is going to be UK centric because that's where I was residing at the time. I remember this Stan with the sample from the Dido album. And of course, Real Slim Shady. We'll slice and dice using albums of the year in a moment. We'll get a better feel, I think, album-wise, what was coming out. Texas had a greatest hits album out. Travis the Man Who. I remember this getting played a lot on Radio 2 at the time. Oasis, if you're curious, the album that was out was Standing on the Shoulders of Giants at that point. Best of Blur album was out. So 2000s, you're definitely getting post Britpop. So Top Loader. Was that their debut? Yeah. Didn't really listen to them. Yeah, so quite a bit of stuff here that I wouldn't mind checking out, which I never have checked out. Like some of the Travis stuff. And that's a point I think I've already mentioned. I'm become, by doing this series, I've become very aware of all the, the UK rock bands and, alternate rock stuff that I actually didn't get around to listening to in the 2000s. Just didn't have the time. So let's slice and dice through album of the year. So I'm going to look at some metal albums here, because that's where I was musically. So yeah, I remember, these Hybrid Theory, Linkin Park. Yeah, bought that not long after it came out. Oh no, sorry, it's following album I bought. Yeah, no, I retrospectively bought this. I wasn't into them at the time, but I do remember this album. I remember this, Perfect Circle. Oh yeah, this album. And then I've already mentioned In Flames, the Pantera album, I had that. Hadn't quite got into Sun O at this point. Oh yeah, I have this album. Yeah. I think I have that, I'm not sure. Wasn't really keeping up with Mayhem. I think I have the first two albums and the EP, Wolf's Lair Abyss. I do have that album and that. And a little later I did get into Rhapsody. Yeah, so let's keep that simple. We won't go too deep. Rock-wise, yes, here we go. So I did listen to that. I have that and Queens of the Stone Age. I didn't listen to this album till a lot later. A friend of mine had mentioned this band actually about going to see them in London around that time period. And I kept meaning to check them out, but never got around to it until quite a bit later. Probably not until I got into some of the other post-rock bands like Explosions in the Sky. So that would have been the late 2000s. And then I started to listening to stuff as I got into 2009. I moved over to Canada and Spotify became more of a thing. I started to listen to a lot of post-rock on Spotify. But yeah, not really any of this stuff apart from the ones I've mentioned. I do have this. And my wife's a big fan of the Hives. And of course this came out as well, although I didn't buy it. And Stiff Upper Lip. Oh, there you go. So there wasn't Explosions in the Sky album out at that point in that year. And as I said, I wasn't into them by then. This is a really good album. If you haven't checked out Idlewild, particularly this album, check them out. I did feature them on an episode on my music podcast. What track was it? Oh, yeah, this is one reason why I don't like clicking through them, because you get these really invasive adverts. Apart from the ones that are already there. Punk album releases. So yeah, I need to properly listen to this album. But I had this, bought that when it came out. I didn't listen to this till later. I kept seeing this ad in... This band were heavily advertising in Terrorizer. I thought originally they were banned from the US. They're actually from Europe. I think they're from Northern Europe, actually. Oh, there's Ænima, yep. Have that. Yeah, I was pretty much heavily engaged with extreme metal, not really listening to that much punk at that point. Electronic wise, most of this stuff, although, you know, I have a soft spot for electronic music, and eventually synth pop, to me, I think I've said, you know, 79 into 83, synth pop was the complete antithesis to what I was into, and the devil. Which is funny considering what I was listening to. But with all the, you know, the Nawubum and hard rock. But yeah, I suppose I slowly warmed to it really through listening to Depeche Mode, who I've really liked the darker side of. And then I sort of fully embraced it. I suppose when I bought a really cool book on ambient music, which featured quite a lot of electronic ambient in it. So, although, you know, this has got lots of electronica in it, and I did buy this at the time, mainly because it came up on the Terrorizer list, I so wish I'd listened to much more Goldfrapp at the time they came out. I really like this band now. So that was their debut. Ulver were also doing really interesting things. I'd listened to, was it Marriage of Heaven and Hell album? I think that's the right name for it, the double album, and really got into what they were doing with sort of trip hop and electronica, but I didn't keep up listening to their soundtrack. This is also a really cool band, very dark, pretty disturbing actually, just the sounds they make, and yeah, music to play in the dark. Yeah, that Fatboy Slim album was out as well, and Enigma. But most of this stuff not checking out. Oh, Chicane, I love Chicane now, and you know, rediscovered those sort of two early albums. And then just looking at albums generally, yeah, I didn't get into OutKast until a little bit later. And really not that much. Yeah, I didn't listen to this at the time. I actually own on CD another Electric Wizard album, but I just can't remember off the top of my head. Oh, oops, I did it again by Britney Spears. That was huge at the time. Bloodflowers by The Cure. Again, a lot here we've already seen, of course, because this is just the whole, you know, the whole year without any genre filtering. Yeah, but nothing else really springs up. And as I usually do, and just wrap it up by having a quick look at film, see if there was anything I remember I think I'm just going to really just concentrate on British films of 2000, or the year I'm talking about, just simply because it's less to go through. So 2000s, I think I may have been going to the cinema a little bit. I do remember this coming out. I didn't see it when it came out. I had a friend that they raved on about it all the time. And when it came out on DVD, they got the DVD and then lent it to me, and then I ultimately bought it on DVD. I liked it so much. Also, really good soundtrack as well to that. Yeah, excellent soundtrack. Apart from that, I remember seeing Quills. That's a pretty weird film about the Marquis de Sade. But I didn't see it at the cinema. That came out on TV. I never remember which Guy Ritchie films I've seen. I think I've seen that one. Yeah. But not at the time it came out. Yeah, Ray Winstone's really good. What was that film he was in with Kathy Burke? I think it's called Nil by Mouth. It's a pretty gritty film. Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, we have that in the house. I think my wife's got a copy. I did see that when it came out. I think we saw the stage show in London as well. On one of my return visits to the UK. And I always liked, for nostalgia's sake, have a quick look at, stuff around that time on the BBC that had been running in that lead up to time period, and stuff was that was wrapping up. I do remember The League of Gentlemen, that surreal horror sitcom, comedy horror sitcom. What a combination! Of course, Top of the Pops 2, that had been running for quite a while. But then also the stuff that wrapped up in 2000. So Pingu, sadly, although was resurrected for a couple of years. Spectre Morse, I used to watch that a lot. There's quite a few here actually, it's quite nice. There's quite a lot here that my mum enjoyed. I used to watch when I was in the UK, and as far as I know she still watches now, like Inspector Morse. Both my mum and my dad really enjoy that. But the one I used to watch a lot with her in the 2000s was Dinner Ladies. This is really funny, actually. Anything else here? Not really that I used to watch. Of course, Rosie and Jim was on, and I remember occasionally watching that because at that point I was working for myself, so I was in and out a lot during the day, and so would probably catch a lot more daytime TV than a lot of people would normally see. It would just be on in the background. So yeah, wow. But yeah, it's cool. Dinner Ladies was on the list there. Yeah, it ran from 98 to 2000. Big Breakfast was running through that period. I don't know if anybody has watched the UK Robot Wars. We used to watch that a lot. I think it was on a Friday night. I think the whole family used to watch that actually. Cool. So I think I'll end it there. Hopefully you enjoyed that. It was really, that's as always, has brought a big smile to my face when I think that of all the stuff that I was listening to at that time, including the album that I've gained joy in rediscovering. So thanks once again for listening and watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.